And we should be good to go.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Monday, April 5th, 2021 meeting of the Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School Committee. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. In attendance, looks like Zane Fitzgerald, Jim Dykeman, Joe Tierney, Jennifer Rose, Phil Morris, Joe Glynn, and our two student representatives. Looks like everybody's here. And Carol Woodbury. There we go. So our first order of business are the reports from our student representatives.
I'll go first. Not too much has been going on, but our volleyball team is still undefeated. I believe that they are #2 in the whole state right now, so that's a very big deal. And over the weekend, the football team beat Nauset, I believe, 22-20. So it was a pretty close, but definitely a very exciting game. And one thing that it hasn't fully been approved yet, but we're hearing that MCAS for the class of 2022, it looks like it's going to be canceled or at least postponed until the fall, but the sophomores will still have to take it. Tynan?
Correct. And then we have the Winter Percussion and Winter Guard having their performance for the community April 15th. It's going to be in person in Zoom. The parents right now are signing up to do it. We're doing, I believe, 3 shows throughout the day. And then next week, it'll be open up for the community members to sign up. I don't know yet where it's going to be live streamed, but I'm sure it's going to be on YouTube. Another thing is students are finishing up their AP exams and like learning, and teachers are going into review. So the home stretch is like right here. It's like just about to end. And students are really looking forward to just relaxing during the spring break and like staying at home and being able to just mentally relax. And that's it from us.
Thank you both. Anyone have any questions for Grace or Tynan? Thank you both for joining us. Joe Tierney?
I'm sorry, I just had a quick question for him, just to see how like classes are going and student movement around the building. Is it if you guys feel comfortable where you are and how things go? I've heard some really good things. I just want to get your perspective on it. That's all.
I would just definitely say that, yeah, I believe that the whole district is doing, quite frankly, amazing right now, especially during this period. I find that a lot of the students are happy, the hybrid is working for them, and teachers are being very flexible. It's working out pretty well. Of course, there are challenges, especially with some kids being full remote, so it's a little harder to get materials, but excuse me, everybody's been very flexible with different pickup and drop off times. And at least in my experience and from the experiences that I've heard from those around me, people seem to be pretty happy.
I agree. The 6 feet distancing and everything in the school is going really well. I'm sure, as you guys know, there's been like no real contact tracing, so like COVID transmission in the school. It's always been like out of the school. Students are feeling safe, and teachers are very accommodating for students' needs, mental health, or just getting assignments in. So it's been very like relaxed, but at the same time, we're also getting work done.
Have there been conversations about sort of traditional end of the year activities for seniors?
Yes.
How that's going to happen or not?
Yeah, so we, I don't know if it ever got approved, but I know our class advisor, Ms. Endich, talked to the Board of Health, I want to say last week, Monday. And we have this whole entire senior week planned out for social distance and everything. And prom is going to be outside, masks, and in a venue that will only hold up to like 150 people. And so we are planning, senior graduation and everything like that. It's of course just going to be socially distanced and following the guidelines and approval with the Board of Health. So we do have senior week, prom, and all the events leading up to graduation. I just don't think that we're gonna have a senior last assembly, but we will have like a banquet. But I may be wrong on the assembly, but that's from my knowledge where we are.
Thanks. I'm sure a lot of that is still in the works, but I was just curious. Great. All right. Thank you both. Our next order of business are reports from our liaisons to the boards of selectmen. Jennifer?
Hi. So at the last select board meeting for the town of Dennis, the really two big takeaways that I'll share with everybody tonight is that the election day for May 11th for the town of Dennis, the poll times have been shortened from 12 to 6 p.m. So that for two reasons, that there's no contested races and that there are no questions on the poll. And they were talking about doing mail-in ballots as well. And then the second item that I feel that it's worthy to share is that the select board and the finance committee set another date in April to go over the budget that was presented on 3/31 to the finance committee. So there'll be another meeting coming up next week with the select board and the finance committee to go over what was presented on the 31st. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Is there a report for Yarmouth? Joe Glenn, you have your hand raised.
Yes, Madam Chair, just a couple quick items. The bulk of the meeting was about the Grays Beach issue, but there was, of course, a COVID update from Bruce Murphy, the health director. He mentioned three things that are relevant to the district. One, that he emphasized that the district and the health department are in constant contact. There was the uptick, but as the student liaison said, there was no in-school spread. There were 3 testing days at the schools over 3 different days, and there were nearly 600 tests. I think, over 150, 60 each day or so. And of those 3, I think there was 0 one day, 4 and 2. So he was very happy at the results being so low. The only other conversations of relevance was there was a question from public comment in regards to our finance committee meeting, and there was Ed Centio, the Yarmouth finance director, was on the Zoom meeting, but he had a simultaneous meeting, so he tried his best, and I think he conveyed that to the committee and the subcommittee, but there was just some question about Yarmouth's involvement in interest in the finance portion and the budget, and I assured them that we are on it, and Yarmouth members were present. I was present, and of course Phil Morris is on the subcommittee, so I know that we were there. So other than that, everything looks good. I think that there is a meeting on the I think there's an agenda item for the district to come in and present going forward. And the Yarmouth town election is May 18th, but our town meeting is the 22nd, which is usually in reverse order, but that's how I believe it's going to go, but maybe someone else has that. But other than that, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Joe Tierney, you had your hand raised. Do you have something on the selectmen?
Yep, just real quick, just to let everybody know, our new town administrator started, I believe today was his first day, Bob Wittenauer, and I actually got to meet him today. Real nice guy. I believe he's worked with, over in the Vineyard, worked with a regional school district scenarios, so we kind of understands, a little bit about that, our the regional school district. So it was nice to meet him. Again, we welcome to the town of Yarmouth, and look forward to working with him. So, and I believe, and Carol might be able to correct me, but I believe the 13th is the date that we meet with the selectmen, but I'm not positive on that.
I believe
thank
that's
you.
accurate. I believe that's accurate.
Okay.
All right, Joe, you want to go right into a building committee report if you have one?
Yep, not too much to report on the building committee. We did meet last week, Carol and myself, PMA, our project managers, and I think it was Peter McNulty, our counsel, on the bid protest CTA. You know, we kind of knew that was coming. They filed a bid protest, and they're asking for a whole bunch of information. And part of the discussion was whether or not we hold off on executing the contract with Commodore, who we voted in last meeting, or wait to see what happens with this bid protest. We have every right to execute the contract, which we indicated to PMA and to Peter McNulty that we're going to do that. So we're going to keep moving. You know, the only drawback that if CTA does win the bid protest, that just means that you know, the other companies, you know, out, and then there's some movement and some things like that, but the project can keep going. That's the big thing. You know, we want to try to keep this on the same timeline, and you know, we feel, or I feel pretty good that we're in pretty good footing on a bid protest. I know PMA, and we pretty much made sure that we were pretty much covered every step we made, including all our votes in the school committee and with the subcommittee, that were pretty straightforward. So we feel pretty good that we'll be able to keep moving forward with Commodore. So, and hopefully they'll be getting started. I believe, you know, once the contract's executed and everything, you know, you might start seeing some movement around Station Avenue soon. So that was all I had.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, Joe. So now that we've bid protests aside and allowing that process to go through, how long does it take Commodore to mobilize? And, you know, do we have an official date for that they go start digging?
No, I think it all depends on the exact date that we execute and get all the contracts signed and get everything all set up. But you know, PMA did indicate, you know, once everything's in place, then they're going to get their subcontractors ready to go and you know, rolling in. There's a lot of pre-work that has to happen before anything really has to happen. Like, you know, fencing has to be delivered, and you know,
Sure.
some trees have to be cut, and some access roads have to be cut in before they can.
I think we all want to be there to see that first
Yeah, no, I can't wait. I try
shovel
to
on the
drive by
ground.
every
So don't
day,
let
and-
them start without us, please.
I know. I drive by every day and
Seriously.
have seeing something. But you know, just so people know,
Yeah.
you know, it's exciting to see, and you know, maybe there'll be some movement in the next month or so out there. So, but
Thanks.
you know, all is planned. So, thank you.
Joe Glenn, did you?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Joe quickly to you. Joe, is there a standard, did they give you any indication of a standard time process on the bid protest, or how long, you know, we might see the results?
Yeah. So from what I understand, it goes to the Attorney General's office, and he reviews it, and then it goes to the next step. If he, you know, thinks it's the viable to move forward, then they move forward to the next step. But then he has the ability to basically squash it right at that point. There are appeals processes along that road, just like anything. I believe, and I'm not positive, but I believe, you know, it's 3 weeks to a month before we really find out what's going on. That was the importance of trying to keep going, because if we lose a month just sitting here waiting on a bid protest, then that pushes that finalized date back past the Christmas time, which isn't a big deal. If they could come in and work harder and work 6 days a week like that to get it done on time, but that also means we would pay a premium because they would have to work overtime and things like that. So there'd be a premium on that. So that's why we kept going. But I think it was 3 weeks to a month that we kind of hear back from that.
Great, thank you.
All right. Next is a report, and actually just want to look at the attendees here. And I need to move Tomas over. So the next is a report on our diversity and inclusion subcommittee, and the committee has now met 3 times, I think, officially. And we are making some slow progress. And hopefully we will have some much more informative reports to bring back to you. Right now, we are working on our mission statement, our vision. We're trying to bring in some experts. We've done some group, some small group conversation, and done some brainstorming. We're just at the very beginning of this process. So I actually just heard back from a consultant we'd like to bring in, and so I'll be presenting that to the subcommittee. But in the meantime, on the agenda tonight is the anti-racism resolution, and Tomas, who is on the diversity and inclusion subcommittee, is going to present that to the committee tonight. So Tomas.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. This past June, the Massachusetts Association of School Committee sent a template for anti-racism resolution, hoping that its 319 member school committees would each pass their own resolution. The resolution, which calls on school districts to offer professional development on diversity, equity, and inclusion for its staff, hire diverse teaching staff, and for curriculum to include the history of racial oppression and works from diverse perspectives, was crafted by Hearst and Ludlow School Committee member Jacob Oliveira. The Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School District Diversity and Inclusion Subcommittee reviewed the template at our last meeting and made adjustments where appropriate. In the attached packet is the final version that was voted on unanimously by the subcommittee, and tonight we asked the school committee to vote to adopt it. And attached reads as follows. It's titled the Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School Committee Anti-Racism Resolution. Whereas schools have the responsibility to equip students with their civil right of obtaining a free and appropriate public education, it is the responsibility of each school to ensure we create a welcoming and inclusive community for all students. And whereas it is a responsibility that every district provide to all district staff, including school committee members, annual professional development on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And whereas every district will commit to recruiting and retaining a diverse and culturally responsive teaching workforce. And whereas every district will examine their policies for institutional and systemic rationalized practices and implement change with sustainable policies that are evidence-based. And whereas every district will incorporate into the curriculum the history of racial oppression and works by Black authors and works from diverse perspectives. And whereas we as a school district leaders can no longer remain silent to the issues of racism and hate that continue to plague our public and private institutions. Be it resolved that the Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School District and all the school districts in the Commonwealth must guarantee that racist practices are eradicated and diversity, equity, and inclusion is embedded in practice for our students, families, faculty, and staff. We must ensure our own school culture, that of every district in the Commonwealth, is anti-racist, and that each acknowledges that all lives cannot matter until Black lives matter.
Thank you very much, Tomas. Would anyone like to move approval of the resolution?
So moved.
And I see by Phil Morris. Wonderful. Discussion on the resolution. I don't know if Tomas has anything to add or if anybody on the committee has questions or comments on the resolution. Joe Tierney?
Yeah, Jen, just Tomas. So the resolution, what does that enable us to do, or what is it just a?
This is something that the Mass Association of School Committees asked as of last June, and it gives the school committee and the district power to then spend money on some of these items. I know you're working on the budget, and there's been a lot of talk at previous meetings about being able to spend money in trainings, and this in essence gives the power for the school committee to approve that, as well as the district, as well as makes a stance that we as a district are going to make sure and ensure that this is something that we're serious about moving forward with.
That's great. No, thank you. I appreciate that explanation. It helps me a lot. Thank you.
Phil Morris?
I recently did a video about the 10th anniversary of the Shark Navigator Liftway the MASC, which Tomas made reference to, has as its divisions geographical ones, and the Cape and Islands is Division 7. But I believe it's a Division 10 is urban school districts or school districts that have a sizable minority population, which in that case would include DY with a 35% plus population. I'll gather some materials. They do have meetings. Only people who can participate are members of school committees, but I can gather material and have it at the service of the subcommittee and to the chair as well. So I just wanted to alert Tomas and Zane and Jennifer that we have another opportunity to take part in this movement. Thanks.
Thanks, Phil. Zane?
Yeah, that was a little bit of what I was going to get to. I was going to ask if MASC was going to have trainings, and if as a result of, in addition to asking this, that there was going to be some sort of committee or that was coming from the state level that was going to be offering some of this kind of continued professional development. And if that's something that is going to be offered through the district, or is that something that we're seeking out individually? Because I'm very interested in it, but wanted to fall inside the lines of what was appropriate.
So MASC does offer trainings from time to time, and recently they did offer an online webinar that many members, some members of our school committee and of our diversity and inclusion subcommittee participated or attended that webinar, and we're very impressed with the consultant who presented. And so she's the person that I've reached out to try to hire to work with our subcommittee to help us develop our priorities and our strategy, and then potentially to do wider trainings for staff, administration, students, whatever we can, however we're able to work this out. And this is going to be long-term. So she's probably not the only consultant. We're probably looking at bringing in multiple speakers and trainings and presentations, workshops for staff, administration, teachers, students, everybody. So, and, I think that's the important part of this resolution is, this is us saying out loud to ourselves and to everyone that this is a priority and that we are committing ourselves to doing these things, and this is not just a piece of paper that everybody, says, oh, I agree and I sign off. This is us committing time, resources, our energy and attention, and making our diversity and inclusion work a priority. So, Zane, did I answer your question?
It did. Thank you very much.
All right. I'm sure there'll be training for school committee members as part of that. So, anybody else? Great. All right. We'll do a roll call vote on the resolution. Zane?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Joe Tierney?
Yes.
Jennifer Rose?
Yes.
Phil Morris?
Yes.
Joe Glynn?
Aye.
And I vote yes. So passes unanimously. Thank you all. Thank you for presenting that tonight, Tomas.
Thank you all.
All right. Next on the agenda is the FY22 budget update, please. Carol, you're muted.
Our school committee finance subcommittee had a meeting last week to review the budget. And one of the things that was of concern to everyone was how to possibly assist our two towns to go through this budget process and do so without, for example, an override for either of the two towns, primarily because we know that we're living in some very challenging times right now. And we did not want to have the school budget be an extra burden on the two towns. So I have a few things for you tonight, and I'll discuss them as we go. So I want to do a little bit of a recap, just in case there are people tuning in for the first time. A little update on the debt service after receiving the bond anticipation notes, some of the challenges that I feel we're facing, maybe a possible solution. And I may seek a school committee vote tonight, but I have a feeling that I'm going to ask you to table this based on some new information that I received just before the meeting. So here's where we are right now. As you can see, our budget was, our final budget was adopted on March 8th. As it stands right now, this is where I think the town meetings are scheduled to be. And so that's sort of the next piece in the puzzle. There are some meetings, as Joe said, we'll be meeting with the Yarmouth Selectmen on the 13th. And I believe we're slated to see the Dennis Finance Committee tomorrow evening as well. This initial budget was based on the governor's budget. Sometimes by now we have information from the legislature, either the House budget or the Senate budget. But this year we do not. And so everything that we've done so far has been based on the governor's budget. And this was the cherry sheet revenue as of the time that you voted your final budget. The Chapter 70 reimbursements, you can see there, the regional bus transportation reimbursements, some charter school reimbursement, and what we anticipate for revenue from school choice. And then also on the cherry sheet are some expenses. And you can see these here. When you take the revenue that was anticipated and subtract the expenses, the actual increase in the revenue from the state through the governor's budget was a mere $26,854. So not really much to help our two towns, as you can see, for the district. Also last year, the two towns agreed to a new budget funding formula with some changes to the regional agreement. That change impacts the portion of the budget that is divided by the student enrollment. They agreed to use a 5-year rolling average when looking at the student enrollment to help smooth out the drastic drops and increases in enrollment numbers in just 1 year. The changes were based on the belief that the towns could continue to provide a better education together rather than separately. And the impact would be, for now anyway, that Dennis would pick up a little bit more than their share based on the actual enrollment, and Yarmouth would be helped to better able to provide funding. So as you can see here, if you compare the 5-year rolling average, which is in the purplish type circle on both sides, to the actual enrollment, which is down here next to the FY22, you can see the difference is about a 2.2% swing between the 5-year rolling average and the actual enrollment. Oops. The calculation of each town's portion starts with what the state says the minimum required contributions will be for each town. And you can see that up here in the yellow. After that is subtracted out, you can see in the circle the number that's called the assessment above the minimum. That's the number that's divided by what is agreed to in the regional agreement. So this is where we divide by the 5-year rolling average in this particular case, because that was how it was agreed to in the regional agreement. In the budget that the committee voted on March 8th, this shows the revenue that was applied against the budget. I draw your attention to this section that says district revenue and the amount of E&D that was applied. For our newer members and those in the public that might maybe following this for the first time and are not familiar with regional school district budgets. E&D stands for excess and deficiency. And at the end of every fiscal year, any surplus or deficit in the district's general fund is closed to the excess and deficiency fund. Then on or before October 31st, we submit forms and schedules to the Commissioner of Revenue for certification, and they certify what is called fondly our E&D. And this is very similar to the same process that a town goes through with certifying their free cash. When you voted the tentative budget, there were a few staff positions in the budget that we originally added before we knew about ESSER. We're going to get some more CARES Act money or COVID money known as ESSER, such as our medical assistants. We kept that in the budget because at the time we weren't sure. That was at the time of the tentative budget. But other than staffing, there was nothing else related to COVID in the tentative budget. Before you voted the final budget, any of those positions, such as the ones I mentioned previously, the medical assistants, were taken out of the budget before the final budget was voted on, simply because we were aware that we will get some additional funds to help support those positions. And so it was really important that we not put those kinds of things in our budget. It's like getting a grant. If you can buy it out of your grant, especially if it's a one-time kind of expense, we don't expect to always need medical assistance once COVID is over. But for now, we still do. So next up, the other post-employment benefits, commonly known as OPEB. We had left some money in our budget to pay for OPEB. The towns have put some money aside each year for their own OPEB because this is what really we're being told to do. And as you all know, it comes up often during our audit, and it affects our position in terms of how well we do in our audit and also our bond rating. So in the beginning, you could, when they first started requiring OPEB to be funded, districts and towns could just take what was at the end at the end of the year left over in their health insurance and put that into OPEB. But they've changed the law on that. Now in your budget, you're supposed to call it out. So we've done that now in the line item budget. We've called out. It's so when it looks, it's not just the health insurance. Some people were questioning, why is the health insurance line still going up when we were given a 0% increase basically from the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group. Part of the reason that we had left a little money in there was so that we could spend some money on OPEB because we have not contributed to OPEB over the last 4 years. And it really seemed like it was something that was important for us to do. So we did leave that in. We also have just a little bit of money in our insurance line for possible new hires or for people who might change plans during the year. We keep just a small cushion there. So these are the assessments that you voted as your final budget on March 8th. And I call your attention to the debt service numbers, which are both in the $600,000 range as I discuss the next piece of this presentation. On January 25th, you had your tentative budget. We had our public hearing. On February 22nd, Lynn Welsh, our bond counsel, presented regarding the bond anticipation notes. You all may recall that Ken had his surgery on the 5th of March. On the 3rd of March, he left me with the presentation that would have been in your packet on the 8th that I subsequently gave to the committee. However, since he was in the hospital on the 4th of March, he and I never had a chance to go over the numbers, and left out of those numbers were the revised debt service numbers for the first interest payment on the bond for the intermediate middle school. And somehow we're going to have to figure out a way to rectify this situation. The total cost of that interest is $747,548. This amount, per the regional agreement, is split between the towns, and it's a 65% to Dennis and 35% to I'm sorry, 35% to Dennis and 65% to Yarmouth. In this slide, it has been added to the previous debt service numbers. This does cause the overall budget to increase, but it has no impact on the operating increase, as this is already exempt debt that should have been, approved by the two towns through the vote on the project. However, at last week's Finance Subcommittee meeting, the members were interested in trying to find a solution that would not result in an override to support the operating budget. So I'll recap the concern and a possible solution. Here's the issue, just to make sure that all of the members are aware, that has arisen with the operating budget and the assessments. So despite the changes to the regional agreement, when you voted your final budget of 3.37% increase, it resulted in an increase in Yarmouth's assessment that's over 1.3 million above 2.5%. For the town of Dennis, their increase is just a little over 77% below a 2.5% increase. And this does include the debt service at this point. So where are we now? What actions can we take to smooth out the budget vote in both towns? First, since your final budget vote, I have received some additional information about retirements and staffing changes that allowed for a few adjustments downward to the overall budget. Kind of a reminder that the budget that we bring at any point in time is really just a moment in time, and almost on a daily basis, there could be new information. Someone has made a decision to retire, someone switches jobs, goes to another district. So it's kind of fluid, but at some moment in time, we vote the budget, and that's what it is, and that's what we live with. The health insurance line has been adjusted to allow for a defined line in OPEB at a cost of $120,000. This was previously listed under the health insurance, as I stated earlier, and this still with the slight increase for plan changes and new hires. However, I would suggest adding $120,000 to the revenue side of the ledger from E&D, so that technically the OPEB costs have no impact on the town's assessments. These actions reduce the budget to a 2.72% increase for FY22. And without OPEB, if we took that out, the increase would be 2.54%, which I think is a modest increase for a budget our size. So if you look at the top part of the screen and you see the first circle, that's what I showed before. The tentative budget, the final budget, we added 125,000 of E&D, the extra 120,000 being added. This would be the change down here of 245,000 coming from E&D now. This year, when E&D was certified, we were notified that we had $2,774,432. As you can see, this is very close to the allowable 5% of just over 3.2 million. It's probably the best in 16 years that I've seen. And as I explained to the committee last time, the reason that this happened, and we have to be very careful with not putting holes in our budget by utilizing E&D for operating costs. The reason that this happened was in FY19, we did not receive our reimbursement for our transportation. We received 2 payments for the transportation reimbursement in FY20. And those are typically over $1 million. I looked it up today. The last one was 1.4 million. So between that and then the fact that in March, we went out on remote learning for the rest of the year, we saved some more money in transportation. We also saved some money in some of our facility costs. So at this point, you know, again, I do recommend the $120,000 for OPEB, since we haven't put anything in OPEB for over 4 years. So if we left this budget the way it was, with a 2.72% increase, without adding the debt service numbers in, the savings would be $419,056, which isn't a lot. It's under 1%, 0.69%, but it is a reduction, and it is a reduction that we could make without having any negative impact on the students or the district. When we add in the, when we take a look at where this would put us with the comparison of 2.5% increase, because in particular, Yarmouth would like their assessment not to go up more than 2.5% each year, which is, as you can see, very difficult to do. That still leaves Yarmouth with 977,736 above a 2.5% increase, while at this point, Dennis would be $254,694 less than 2.5%. So their increase would be less than 2.5% increase. So the question becomes, are there other ways to ensure that this can be funded in Yarmouth without an override? And so we started to talk about at our finance subcommittee meeting what kinds of things would help to free up some money in the two towns, so that they could fund the operating budget, but they'd have the finances to do it without an override. So we first took a look at our capital requests. As most folks know, the capital requests that we make are outside the budget. These numbers are not included in our operating budget. We go before the town's capital committees. We make priority lists and so on and so forth, and let them know what things are priority for us. Last year, with how things were for the two towns, we took our capital requests off the table at their request. This year, they said if you could keep them small, we would appreciate it. So we did. Our energy management system is basically at this point, for the high school, and the boiler burners for the high school need to be replaced. The energy management system ultimately helps our facilities manager control all of the systems from one computer. However, we can't do it all at once. It doesn't make sense right now. We're hopefully going to be closing Matakees and Wixon in the next couple of years. It doesn't make sense to include those. And so at this point, this was the request just to get that whole management system started. We've been requesting it for a number of years now. But if we took those two items, the 156 on the 156,000 on the Dennis-Yarmouth side and the $373,000 on the Yarmouth side, the grand total of that capital is listed here as $530,477. If we took that out of our E&D, that would be money that the two towns would have available to hopefully put toward the operating budget. Despite my efforts, I have talked with our district's attorney pretty extensively between the time of the finance subcommittee meeting and today. And one of the things that he felt strongly about was that it would be, there are challenges with trying to do this at this point in time. He felt that the most transparent way and legal way to do it would be to put these items into our budget, which again causes our budget to go up. He did say that if the towns got together and agreed to this, that we might want to have some kind of agreement between the school committee and the two towns to agree. Most of the time we do talk about our budget going down and not going up. We also talked about the possibility of putting it in a separate warrant article. But there's some language in some of the regulations that talk about the budget because, for example, I'll use an example because I think it's the best way to do it. Say we wanted to put this $530,000 into a separate warrant article for our capital and pay for it out of E&D. The question was, could we put it into our capital stabilization fund? You may recall that a couple of years ago, we established a capital stabilization fund. It went before both town meetings. It passed at both town meetings. We never put any money in there because at that time we did not have any money to put in there. But if we went forward and we asked for this $530,000 from our E&D to go into the capital stabilization fund, what the attorney said was that it really has to be included in your budget. So the question is, how do we get around? Is there a way to get around? I don't know. So that's why I said we may have to table this. We might need some more information. So these are one-time expenses. If they were in the budget this year and they came out of the budget next year, it would be no harm, no foul. If we didn't have E&D, doesn't matter. They're paid for, they're done, it's over. Here is the split on the interest on the intermediate middle school. And the interest costs combined are the 747 that I mentioned earlier. Again, if there was a way to fund this debt service through our E&D, we could do that. And as you can see, between everything that we've done so far, we would still have 1.3 million, almost 1.4 million in our E&D. So I think that would be safe for us to do without too much trouble. So this just is sort of a recap of the whole thing, of those two pieces. If we use D&D, it frees up funds for the towns to fund our operating budget. It would free up $859,527 for Yarmouth and $418,498 for Dennis. These are just the corresponding assessment calculations. You see those on your assessment worksheet. No real need to go through these again. I think you've seen these before, just with the other numbers, and you have the assessment. So this is where it would be. We would have the assessment calculation here of the 979,000 in Yarmouth, but offset by what we would spend in E&D for 859,527. So I believe it's in the neighborhood of about $120,000 difference. And again, there would be no additional debt service here, but this is the budget number, 67,872,419. And that would be what you'd vote. I am recommending that we table this for tonight. I was hoping to get it done, but I think we need a little more research I intend tomorrow to call Desi, actually. I think that's where we can get another opinion on this, to find out exactly how we can manage this. We do have another meeting next week, so I feel like it would be prudent now. Certainly, no one wants to break the law. If it's the law that we can't increase our budget, I don't know what else we can do. So,
Carol, can you go back one slide?
sure.
Yep, just for a second. I just need to look at those numbers.
Mhm.
So the one budget we most recently passed was the 67,670.
No, hang on. Nope. The budget, wait a minute, hold on. Let me see if I got it here. Yes, 67,670.
998. Okay. And so with the new debt service.
That would be with the new debt service. We didn't pass that one yet, did we? Because we didn't know the debt service. The budget, hang on, sorry, let me scoot back to my page. The budget that you voted had the final budget, I believe, that you voted on March 8th was the 3.37% increase, and it was 66,923,450.
66,923 was what we passed. The 66,923 is what we passed.
Yes.
Okay, so okay, all right. Sorry, Joe Glenn had his hand up first, and then Phil Morris, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Carol. Carol, were there any discussions with council on, is there a statutory calendar issue, or could we just rescind our previous votes, or at least our last one, that 66 that Jenny just referenced? Because my gut concern is that by law this can't go up, but if there's just a calendar issue that we had to stick by, that obviously we can't go back in time, but if council had the recommendation that we just rescind one or two of our previous votes and start all over right now and put the debt service in there, and then we could still do those reductions, and I believe I think you're right on track with the OPEB and our conversations with Lynn Welsh and the bond rating, which I think it helps the health with the rating agencies and the psychology for both towns. But I think that we should, I agree with you that we should table this. But I just want to see if council had any recommendations or are there any discussions about just rescinding our previous votes, because I don't think we can go up.
Yeah, the problem that we have, honestly, is that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, wait a minute, somebody's got music in the background there. I believe that the final budget needs to typically be voted 45 days prior to the first town meeting. And that's where we're going to run into problems, Joe, because we don't have 45 days.
Right. That's what I was saying about the calendar issue.
Yep.
But I don't see how I think this is going to be viewed as an increase, which we can't do either. So it's like two things that we can't do. But
right. Well, like we've always said, your budget can always go down, but it can't go up, right, after the final vote. So that's why, but these were suggestions that, we were trying to take really seriously and find a way to help our towns right now. And I think the impression that I was getting, and again, I don't want to speak for our subcommittee members, so they can certainly speak for themselves, but the impression that I was getting was that if we could help the towns free up some cash for the operating budget by taking care of some things that were one-time things. We don't want to put all that E&D against the budget because that only creates a hole for future years. We've been down this road before. And so again, I'm not really sure. So I'll turn it back to the chair for other comments.
Thank you.
Phil Morris was next, and then Zane, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In our discussion at the subcommittee meeting, I brought up the point that we have had times when we've had to add due to some emergency or some physical defect that showed up on a roof, or we had to spend some money, or we had to make some repairs using resources that did not increase the operating budget. And that does require coordination. And I cited the example of the roof problem with Matikes 20 years ago, and the situation with the Baker School. Jim Plath was listening in and offered the information that Dennis could pay for those repairs without borrowing, and they had the free cash to do it. So I would think that some coordination with the leaders of the two towns through their financial planning would be in order. I would hate to, I also agree with Joe Glenn that if we just rescinded our previous budget level, we don't really know what the legal parameters, at least I don't know what the legal parameters of that are. So I would be in favor of moving to table this and do some homework to be able to lay it out both legally and financially. So I will make a motion to table, which means waiting until we meet next.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Further discussion, Zane, and then Joe.
Thank you. I had two quick questions. One was that how, I understand that you don't put yourself in the hole with the E&D, but I mean, the interest on the debt, that's not a one-time cost though, right? Because we're going to continue to have those costs year over year, correct?
That's correct, but those are paid for out of debt service for the towns. They've already voted for the project. It's outside the operating budget, technically speaking.
Okay. All right. So it's just to consider. Yeah. Okay. And then the second part is, if we haven't put any money in OPEB in 4 years and the bond rating is as fantastic as I think it was Lynn said in the last meeting, at what point does that not become fantastic if we haven't made payments in 4 years?
Well, I don't know, but I know that our auditor, I had a recent conversation with him and he's highly recommending that we do something.
Yeah. All right.
Because after a while, maybe it has an impact. I'm not really sure how that works.
Yeah, at some point they'll pick that up, I'm sure, but
I'm just surprised it hasn't been at 4 years.
yeah,
Long time.
I'm sure we're not alone, so.
Yeah.
Phil Moore. Oh, sorry, Zane, was that all? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Okay, Phil. No, sorry, Joe Tierney, then Phil again.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. I guess I'll start at the end. I'm also in favor of tabling this. I think it's a good, it's a great idea. I think it's something that hopefully, if we can move forward with something like this, it would work and it would enable the town of Yarmouth to be able to hopefully take $120,000 out of their extra cash and pay for that instead of going through an override. One of the things that Carol mentioned, we're concerned about the legality of this. But one of the things that Carol had mentioned, and I caught on it, was the fact that if both towns agree to doing something like this, it might be feasible. We don't know that. That's why we're going to table it, hopefully. But that's something that that we should look at. If it comes down to yes, you can do this, but you have to have both towns agree on that. So that's one thing. The fact about the capital, I believe, these are all one-time costs, and we're that and with the OPEB is important to put in. I think we can't go any longer without putting something in. We should have more in there anyways. So I think we all kind of agree the fact that we need to put something in it. And I believe it's a line item in the budget anyways, that we do it every year that can just be taken out if we need to. So we have that opportunity. We have money in E&D. We're getting to that cap, the percentage cap of, I believe, $3 million that we're at. We don't know what we'll have in E&D next year, but if it's over that cap, so we have an opportunity to spend some of that E&D on one-time capital costs, OPEB, and offsetting the interest. I think it's a good idea if we can do it. It's just how to go about doing that. The bottom line is that we have a budget. We voted a budget of 3.37%, and if all else fails, we can still go to the towns and try to get the budget passed. If it has to go to an override for Yarmouth, then I guess so be it. It is a lot of money, but I think bottom line is we voted a budget, and we do have a budget. So thank you.
Madam Chair, point of order.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not really up on parliamentary procedure, but it sticks in the back of my brain that when an item's tabled, that the discussion doesn't go forward. But there might have been if there's an original motion, which we didn't have. So I don't know if anybody else knows that.
I don't know that. I mean, I think this is, we're having a discussion about whether or not we should table this.
Yeah, I think it's all right. It just came across. I was looking to see if anybody else had any knowledge on it.
Carol's going to get her rules of order, I guess. I can look this
Yeah, I believe we could discuss whether to table it or not. That would be the discussion.
Right, and I don't think there's not an original motion out there anyway, so we're not.
The motion hasn't been voted
Right.
on either.
Right.
Who made the motion to table?
Phil did, and
Bill did, all right. I think Phil might need to rescind that motion since, or withdraw that motion since there was nothing really to table, right? There was no, I should have noted that at the time, I guess. There was no vote on the floor to be tabled, was there? Phil?
No.
My understanding from many years of town meeting is that a motion to table is discussable, but we're not voting on to table a motion that was made tonight. We're making reference to a motion that existed previously. This is the complicated part of school finance, where we don't have any taxing power. We're not allowed to line item E&D to budget it in advance. We can do it for stabilization, and whereas we have to depend on small help from capital budget from Yarmouth and capital outlay from Dennis to pay for small things.
Phil, hold on a second.
I'll
Carol's
wait-
looking.
Okay, I'll wait until you hear what Carol finds.
Laying on the table is not debatable. It's also not amendable, but it is also by majority vote, and I don't believe there was a vote taken, was there?
No, there was
Not
not.
vote.
So what it says here is that if there was a vote taken, I think then you probably would not be able to put any other motions on the table about this particular question. Is what I'm seeing here. Again, I'm not a parliamentarian, so.
Give me 1 second, please, while I read something. So what I'm reading is that a motion to lay on the table refers to temporarily setting aside a pending motion, and we had no pending motion to table. There had
Right.
been no motion to vote any new budget number. So I think Phil's motion to table was actually out of order.
And I will withdraw it in addition if that helps.
I withdraw the second. I think I was the
Okay,
second.
all right, I think we're okay then. All right, so let's finish up our discussion of questions for Carol on her budget presentation, please. I mean, it's an interesting math and legal problem, right? And, you know, even though we're looking at potentially the budget going up, the assessments to the towns go down. Right, Carol? I mean, we're not.
Well, no, not really. The assessment doesn't go down. What happens is that we, except for the fact that we are not putting in the debt service, we're not putting in that new debt service for the two towns. So that would also would have caused the budget, would have caused the assessments to go up.
On the recommendation that you provided tonight, sorry, and it's like crooked on my screen, so I look trying to read it on my screen, but your recommendation for tonight was the budget of 67,782, 419.
Mhm.
And that had us paying the OPEB, the capital, and the interest, right?
Mhm.
And so that gave a total to Dennis, for instance, of 18,152,864, right? That's what you have on your last screen, your recommendation, right?
Mhm.
What we originally voted on 3/8 was an assessment to Dennis of 18,332,491.
Wait a minute. Wait, let me go back to that page. Yes, the assessments go down because we've reduced the budget by the 2.72, but it doesn't reduce it increases the overall budget.
Right.
And so the question becomes, even though the assessments are going down, are we allowed to increase the overall budget?
Right. Which becomes I think some technical legal questions about whether or not debt service is considered part of the budget or, right. I mean, there are a lot of sort of questions here that we need answered by council.
Right.
But, you know, it does seem like, you know, if there's a way for, as Joe said, if, you know, for the towns to agree that even though the overall operating budget goes up, they understand that with the additional income from the E&D, that the assessments actually go down. So it would benefit the towns in the end, but we have to figure out if we can get there. So,
right.
All right. Phil and Joe, quick last words on this.
It's my understanding that at a town meeting, which is the funding source, the town meeting has to approve the budget number and the assessment number. And we've had disputes in the past where a town would not fund the assessment, but they approved the budget. And when it was taken to court, it has to be both packages or both numbers have to be discussed and voted upon by town meeting. And at the time this was going on, it was being pushed by boards of selectmen. I think it would be of value that we not take any action tonight, but we get counsel, and we also had one representative or two from the Dennis FinCom who expressed a kind of a quiet approval since their assessment would go down. But we have to present something that does not increase a burden on the taxes overall. The town meeting is the final authority.
But no one wants to put something out there, even if they kind of approve of it, if it's not legal.
Right. Joe Tierney, last.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, if we, it's just a matter of taking it out of a different bucket. You know, a Dennis, on the Dennis side, their assessment may be lower, but they're lower than 2.5%. So there's no need for an override. They're pretty much, you know, as far as I can see, they're pretty much all set. They'd be able to pay their bill. Actually, it's going to be a lower bill than normal. In Yarmouth side, it's just literally taking it out of a different bucket. You know, instead of pulling it out of the capital bucket and the interest bucket, they're taking it out of the, you know, they're going to take it out of the general fund to pay for their bill to the school district. So it's just a matter of, it's just a different bucket they're pulling it out of. It's still costing people the same, but it's just a matter of where we pull the money from. So, thank you.
I don't know if this makes a difference, but Yarmouth changed their town meeting date, so I don't think it's 45 days for Yarmouth, but I assume it should be for both.
Yeah, I think we have to, you know, whenever the first town meeting is, which I think is May 8th, I believe.
Did Dennis move to May 8th?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Well, to be continued on this.
Yep.
Okay. Carol, is there anything else that you needed to report on tonight?
No, I would just let you all know that with the commissioners' desire to have more kids back in school, we did our surveys, and many of our students who wanted to come back full-time in grades K-7 returned to school today and enjoyed seeing their friends and so on and so forth. And even though the commissioner has not set a date for our high school students to return, we are working on a plan for our high school kids to return for those who want to. We've done a survey, and it seems like about 2/3 of the students would like to be there full time. So we're just going to have to work out some of the logistics. If we could, we would like to see our kids at the high school back by sometime the beginning of May. But stay tuned, we've got some logistics to work out.
Okay. All right. School committee business on the consent agenda. So we have a donation of Stop and Shop gift cards in the amount of $4,675. That's broken up into two different groups of cards, but all to DY Food Services from Mr. Thomas Kerr, Kerr of Yarmouthport. So thank you to Mr. Kerr for that very generous donation. We also have a donation of Stop and Shop gift cards, 18 cards at 50 each and 4 cards at 25 each from Paul and Jill Brennan of Dennis to families in need at the Ezra H. Baker Innovation School. So thank you also to the Brennans for that very generous donation. A donation of personal protective equipment to the district from the South Yarmouth Ocean State Job Lot, Mark Perlman, owner and CEO. 85 cases of hand sanitizer, 40 cases of hand sanitizer, 46 cases of wipes, 13 disinfecting wipes, and a case of face shields. So that's a big chunk of PPE. Thank you to Ocean State Job Lot and Mark Perlman. We also have the minutes of March 22 and March 26. Does anyone move the consent agenda?
Move the consent agenda.
Second.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous. Thank you. Calendars are enclosed. Bills, requisitions. We're going to move to a public comment period for about 15 minutes. Those wishing to address the committee, please raise your hand using the raise hand option on Zoom. And once I call on you, identify yourself. I will, I'm just pulling up my phone here. You'll get 3 minutes to speak, to address items on the agenda within the purview of the school committee. This is not a question and answer session, and we will try to get your questions to the right people so that you can get your answers. So moving right to public comment, I'm looking at the attendee list. Vita Morris first, please.
Yeah, this is Vita Morris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have to tell you, I'm very disappointed in such a perfunctory agreement on that resolution that you voted on. This is exactly the kind of thing that kind of shows that this district is more interested in peripheral areas rather than concentrating on reading, writing, and arithmetic, the core subjects that are necessary. This particular resolution is so filled with certain agendas and politicized. I think it was actually too bad that you ended up voting on so quickly on it without considering all the possible implications. I just, and also I seem to get the impression that by doing so, you were committing this district to spending money on what's in a very general way described in that agenda all over the place, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, that I think is another very serious matter to think about. That if any of this had any kind of other funding, possibly, that might not be quite as bad. But since it seems to be totally on the district's dime, whatever you proceed in trying to comply with this resolution and its points, I just it's too bad that we are now wading into politically sensitive issues. Thank you.
All right. Next on the list is James.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chair. It's Jim Plath from the Dennis Finance Committee.
Hi, Jim.
Good. Thank you very much. I do want to say that I had an extensive conversation with the superintendent this afternoon as it relates to the assessment, the 66 versus the $67 million budget. We had a very long conversation with that. I'm 100% in support of the recommendations that she had made to the subcommittee for lowering the amounts to both towns. However, I'm reading of the understanding that the $67 million budget cannot be approved by the school committee because it falls after the 45 date and after you have formally voted a $66 million budget. There is a cure for it. I went through some potential funding mechanism with the superintendent, which she did not certainly outline this evening, probably because she wants to have further discussion with council. But I do want to make sure that, excuse me a second. I do want to make sure that my conversation, unfortunately, was very late in the day at 5 o'clock as I was going through the information. But there certainly is a mechanism to cure it, and I do hope that it can be worked out. Just one information for Mr. Zane. When you talked about your bond rating is not based on the Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School District. Your bond rating is based on the two towns. The Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School District does not have taxing authority. So your bond rating is based because Dennis has a very good bond rating, and I have to therefore assume Yarmouth has a very good bond rating. So it's not based on your abilities, it's based on the ability of the two towns to be able to fund the budget and the bills and the debt service. Right? So that's what your bond rating is based on, is the two towns. One thing that people have been talking about is the ability for the two towns to agree on some type of change. I think Mr. Morris brought up probably the most important point there is that the Board of Selectmen or the Finance Committee neither have any authority to make any agreement. the agreements strictly have to come from town meeting. So that does put the school in a little bit of a dilemma as to trying to make any changes. But I would urge the superintendent to talk a little bit about the funding mechanism that I talked to about, which unfortunately will require a little bit more of free cash to satisfy more so Yarmouth than Dennis, because we're able to fund what we have right now. I think in fairness to the superintendent, we will not meet with the superintendent tomorrow evening. It doesn't make any sense for the superintendent to come to the finance committee and say, if the school committee does this, this is what we'll do. If the school committee does A, we'll do that. If the school committee does B. So in fairness to Carol, we will not meet we'll defer a meeting with the superintendent tomorrow. And just one final issue is the FY22 ESSER funds that will be coming from the state. We would like to have some idea how much the ESSER funds are, because members of school districts, the individual towns under House Bill number 1 are entitled, if they ask for a portion of the grant, to come back to the towns and not stay with the district. So we would like to have some answer in the future what the superintendent believes the FY22 ESSER funds would be, and the proportion of money that should come back to both Dennis and Yarmouth, because both of us are well over our retired contributions. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Carol, did you want to?
Well, I can comment on that, and this is coming directly from DESI. Both towns' required minimum contributions went down, and the school district is not required to share any of the money with the two towns unless the required minimum contribution went up.
Okay,
and then they are only required to share that portion above what the minimum contribution increased. But in both of our cases, the minimum required contributions went down.
Okay, thank you very much. I apologize for that. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Great. Is there anyone else in the attendees who want to address the committee during public comment? Tracy Post.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you to the board. I just wanted to thank Carol for her and the subcommittee, the committee as a whole, and the subcommittee for the out of the box thinking this year. That will be, if it's able to be completed, would be, I'm sure, a relief to some of our taxpayers, and it's without any cuts to services delivered to the students, which is really remarkable and amazing. So I just want to say thank you. I'm not sure the logistics and the legalities that go with it. Again, the vote for the school building, taking that money, what you're asking us is to take that and to fund the operating instead of the interest. And I'm not sure on our end, even if that is a possibility. I just wondered if you had any conversations with Ed on that. And also if you could possibly email me your presentation tonight so I can update the board to the best of our ability, my ability next week. Tomorrow night. And I know that we'll be meeting with you on the 13th, and this board, your board, will have the opportunity to potentially take a vote prior to that. So that will be helpful, but I'd like to give the board an update tomorrow if I could just get the presentation. But I would be interested if you talk to Ed and whether or not we're allowed to use our interest to fund operating.
I believe that some of the things that you heard here tonight were suggestions that Ed put forward in an email to Ken and I.
Okay. Well, I look forward to the legal discussion, and I'd like to start that on our end as soon as possible. So if I have the information, that would be great. And whatever details that we need for an agreement outside of what we already have with the town of Dennis, if it's feasible, to start as soon as possible. So again, I just want to thank you.
Tracy, when is your town meeting?
It is May 21st, I believe.
May 21. And when were the elections? Sorry if you know.
It's the 22nd. I'm sorry, Tracy. Yours.
No, I got to get to my calendar. May 22nd is actually a Saturday.
So that's your town meeting?
No, I don't believe, you know what? I'll get back to you. I'll send an email to the board.
Okay.
I know things got flipped around, as Joe Glenn had said earlier, because we pushed off town meeting to do it outside. And so the election will come before town meeting, which is probably even more important for the school committee, because that will be a ballot if there is one needed for an override. So,
right. Okay.
All
right. I can get those dates from.
Yeah, I think Carol had it in her presentation already. I saw it
Okay.
earlier. Thank you very much.
Phil Morris has his hand raised. Does he know it's still public comment period? Do you have a public comment? You're muted.
I do have a public comment. Using Joe's analogy, Joe Tierney's analogy, we'll be okay as long as we don't kick the bucket.
Oh, boy. Okay, thanks. All right. Anyone else for public comment? I don't see any other hands raised. Joe Tierney?
Do we want to go into executive session?
Yeah, please.
I move that the Dennis-Yarmouth Regional School Committee will enter into executive session, not to return to public session, for the purposes of discussing strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining of litigation positions of the public body, and this chair so declares. DYSAA and non-affiliated negotiations.
Second.
Moved and seconded. We'll do a roll call vote on this, please. Zane?
Aye.
Jim?
Yeah, aye.
Jennifer Rose?
Yes.
Phil Morris?
Aye.
Joe Tierney?
Yes.
Joe Glenn?
Aye.
And I vote aye. So we will move to executive session, not to return to public session. So that's the end of our public meeting for tonight. Thank you.